Welcome to the journey. This is Julieann Hartman, and this is part 2 of the Tina Konkin story. And it is amazing because there's been little bits and pieces of stuff of her of information of her story that I didn't even know about. So we're actually going to address those today. If you have not watched episode 1, you need to go back and watch it so you know what we're talking about today. We're talking about relationships. We're talking about marriage. We're talking about an affair. We're talking about the hardness of heart and the things that cause that hardness in our life. They get us to the place where we say, how did I get here, right? We say, how did we get there? And we go, how did this happen? But if you start going back and putting all the pieces together, you will find out how you got there. So I want to welcome you to the show again, Tina. Thank you so much.
Hi, so good to be here again.
Yes, and now let's go back to you. Had just happened to mention that you were sexually abused when you were young.
I was. And the reason I mention that is because in the first episode, we were talking about vows we make as children or young adults because of hurt, because of baggage, because of what we saw, heard, and experienced. And so for me, I vowed that my children would never be able to spend the night at a friend's house or sleepovers or that sort of thing. But I didn't I knew why, because I wanted to protect them from what I had experienced with sexual abuse. But I was hard and fast on it. And my husband came from a different perspective where everybody spent the night at his house. And so that was the compromise we made. I said, anybody can spend the night here. I don't care. I give everybody the welcome card to be here, just not our children out.
Right.
And to him, that was very harsh, but it came again from what I had experienced that was painful, that was hurtful, that was damaging. And I didn't want that to happen to my kids. So there's different things like that. I would never allow my children to not go to church. I was hard and fast about that, and because for me, church was a safe place.
Right.
So I was not going to run my home in any other way. And my husband was the same way in that. But when we started seeing that because of our background, right? I was get this, you want to know some secrets? I was a yeller. Tell you what, I yelled like there was no tomorrow. I lived on a farm with no neighbors. I would yell for my kids to come in for dinner like they were in so much trouble, and they weren't. That was just my way. Why? Well, when I went through Dr. Phil's program way back when, and we started seeing that the things that when we grow up mean something and they stay with us and we don't know we're operating out of those triggers. Well, my mom in our home was the quiet one, but my mom was the dangerous one. My mom was she ruled with an iron fist, right? So you knew when the house was quiet, oh, Jesus, help us. We're in trouble. My dad was totally opposite. My dad was the guy that, would tell you, if I catch you, I'm taking my belt out and you guys are going to get it. Well, he get his belt out and he chased us, but the belt never touched, right? Mm-hmm. Never did figure that one out. But he once made this statement. I don't know why I remember it, but it stayed with me. Now, fast forward, right? But he made this statement: the dog that barks doesn't bite.
Right.
So I barked at my kids because that was safe. I didn't want to be the quiet one. Well, my husband grew up with an angry father at home, not abusive in any way, but when his dad raised his voice, everybody scattered. So guess what? When I had something to talk to him about, I became, besides the fact that I'm also Italian, I became very passionate and I would start raising my voice. Well, he was the avoider. So he'd be like, see you later. Let me know when you're okay. And he'd scatter, he'd leave. Neither one of us knew we were doing that, but it was causing friction in the marriage. Because to me, it was like he was walking out. And for the kids, they got used to it. They knew I wasn't dangerous at all. But he didn't think that was the right way to raise kids either.
Well, it's interesting because being the Italian as well, we
Yes.
are very passionate women. And so it took my husband a long time to realize that I wasn't yelling at him. I was just excited about something.
Yeah.
But that had to come through a lot of communication, a lot of error as well, right? The first couple of years, well, before Jesus, our first 8 years was very volatile. And so we just didn't have, there was nothing holding us together, like the blood of Jesus, right? Like the core of the Lord where we could both hold on to. So my question to you is, so now you said that you were abused. Was it what happened? You were at someone's house, you were a little, how old were you?
And it was, and it was close family too. So, it was, but it was not at my house, right? So, and it started probably when so it happened with several men, like I would say 3 or 4 men that they weren't strangers. I was never raped or anything like that. I was molested, but they were people that my parents trusted, and I could never tell my parents. I was too scared. And so they were at every event we were at, and it was awful. And I couldn't say anything, and it kept going with one till I was 16. So, and then I wasn't scared anymore.
Oh my gosh, Tina, that's just terrible.
Broke it. Yeah.
So, all right. So then you obviously had a lot of fear in your life.
A lot of fear. And, so when you look at, again, I had to go back, in our workshops, we go back and we call it the storyboard, and you kind of look at your story, good and bad, but you start connecting dots.
Yes.
How did that sexual abuse affect my marriage and my parenting? How did it affect my safety with people? I could read people in a room, and right or wrong, they were cut off, that sort of thing. So there's a lot that happens in our childhood that we need to protect ourselves. So when you look at, I keep talking about the hardness of heart, and that's what causes divorce, but take the word divorce out and just think separation in relationships. Yes. Right? It separates you in relationships. But the hardness of the heart for me was created as a child for safety. So it played a role. It had a purpose back then. Some people turned to drugs to medicate. I turned to anger and control. So I had to be in control of everything. Well, bring control into marriage, and what have you got? So when you asked me prior to the affair, was it a good marriage? Yes, just because my husband was easygoing.
Right.
But I'd lose my mind if I didn't have control. Well, my child turns between the age of 8 and 10, I'm losing control. So I'm pushing her away. That's not okay. And I become militant rather than nurturing. Same thing with my husband. When he needed a nurturer, when his mother was dying, I become militant because that's what protected me.
Right. So, all right. So when you just touched on something. So when it's like it's like a guard comes up. And,
yes.
Yeah. And so, and we feel like if we go past that guard, we're going to lose control.
And we're going to get hurt.
So we immediately have to, go to that place in our hearts so that we don't suffer that pain anymore. So interesting how
it is. And you know what? Here's what, and I love counselors. I'm a counselor. But we try to fix the symptom, right? So, or the behavior. So for me, I was explosive. I was an I could explode in a second. I was a vacillator. I could go from 0 to 180 right away. So my anger, though, had protected me as a child while I was being sexually abused.
Yeah. Because
anger hardens you. You don't feel when you're angry.
Yes.
That's why it feels so protective to wear a coat of anger. Right. Yeah. So today I tell people I thank anger for protecting me as a child, but now I have to think as an adult.
Right.
And the adult has to heal the child that needed the anger. And that's what we do in the workshop. Find out, first of all, why I needed the anger. Well, so I didn't feel. So when I got into situations in my marriage where I would feel rejection, or I would feel like I was being, discounted, or he didn't pay attention to me, or he didn't notice I did my hair, right? Right away, that comes into the rejection rock, which I also had as a child, right? Because the first thing I heard from my mom that I can remember is I shouldn't have been born. So all that, always fighting rejection makes it so that you're always on a performance base. But I didn't know all that until I looked back and connected those dots. I needed control. I needed anger. Those two things protected me as a child, protected my heart. And that's what I figured out Jesus meant by the hardness of our heart. And that it's going to separate you in your relationships if that is between you, right? Absolutely. Our hearts were not wired for anger. So how can relationships flourish from that?
Well, especially when the Lord tells us to give us all of the cares.
Yes, exactly.
Whatever is making you feel whatever it might be, to give it to him. We have to give it all to him.
But I liked what you said, Julieann. It's like a guard comes up.
Yeah.
So it's nearly like, it's not that you're not responsible, but you don't even know where it came from. Do you know how many people, I mean, I've worked with thousands of people now in the last 30 years that we've been doing this ministry. But the thing that is most heartfelt is when people look at you and say, I know the problem. I just don't know how to change, how to fix. Right. And it's because they're trying to change their communication. They're trying to change something out, but they're not dealing with the root. My husband used to call it weed whacking. My husband was raised on a farm. He says, you know what weed whacking is? He goes, when you just cut the top of the weed, you don't go inside. Yeah. It's still killing what's good inside, underneath the ground.
Yeah, right. You're wandering around trying to figure out, how do I keep getting back up in this place? For me, I didn't let my kids go and stay at people's homes unless I really, really knew them. I mean, like, really knew them. Only because there wasn't abuse going on in my house, but I know what we were dealing with an alcoholic father. So I just it wasn't even so much the abuse I was thinking about. It was, what if the parents are drug addicts and we don't know? What if, what if a lot of things were happening and our kids just happened to be, in the line of fire with it. So I was that same way too, but here it is, here it was.
But see, you there's a reason, because of what you saw, heard, and experienced. You were, right or wrong, you had a belief system about it. And that belief system, now your husband could have been very different. And that's where in the relationship, the friction comes in. Because if for him, spending the night with friends or at sleepovers was some of his happiest memories, then he thinks you're withholding that from your kids.
Yeah. Well, thank God he was on the same line as I was.
Yeah. That's always good when you're on the same page.
Well, what's crazy is the one time we had our friends watch the two girls for like 2 hours. It was a birthday party and I had to be somewhere else. It was a 2-hour time span. That was it, right? Well, it was a birthday party for a 5-year-old that the kids were at. I mean, why would there be alcohol? I mean, who would ever think there'd be a party, right? Well, there was. And Butch and I walk in after we were gone just 2 hours, and this person had a 2-story house, and on the second floor there was this big opening, all right, where you could look into the living room. And here is my 3-year-old on a chair up on top of that and looking down at us. We walk in and I hear this, "Hi, Mommy." And I look up and she's literally almost halfway over
the rail.
Over the rail. And nobody was looking. Nobody. They were all in the kitchen doing cocaine and drinking. And we never knew it. Yeah. I freaked out on this woman. Anyway, situation like that came up. I had no idea. She was such a responsible mom as far as I could see on the outside. I would have
Right.
never trusted anybody, you know, but anyway, yeah, no one was watching. And here's my little Sophia going, you know, hi, mommy, you know, as she's coming over. And it was the second floor. Anyway, we're going to get back to your story.
Yes.
But yeah, so all these things build up. And so, you know, it's funny. I was just talking with someone the other day and I said, you know, fear doesn't just start like in one day. It has been a progression of days and years and months and, you know, and relationships and all those things. And I know where fear started setting in with me as a kid. And if we really go back, because I've asked the Lord these questions. This is years ago when I was walking through my healing. I would say, Lord, what is going on in my heart? What happened? Where did this start? And you know what? When you ask, you will receive. He will show it to you. And there were things that I asked him. I said, you know, I've asked many times, did my father abuse me? Because I do not remember, but I've had people tell me, some family members have said that there was that going on in the house. But you know what he said to me? He said, would that change anything right now in your relationship with your husband or your relationship with me? And I said, no. So I feel like, okay, whether it happened or it didn't happen, it doesn't matter because my heart has been healed and it's free of all that junk. So, you know, just ask the Lord, ask, he's your father. He wants to tell you whatever it is that you're asking for. He wants to give you the answers.
You know, Julieann, you just said something so deep there, because when I remember when Ron was, diagnosed with cancer and was given 4 months to live, he lived 4.5 years. So it's a good story. But when he was given that, I remember just being distraught. Like he was only 48 years old. We were in the best time of our marriage and ministry. And I remember laying on my bed and going, God, just tell me, just need to know. And so what you just said is so powerful, because he said, will it make a difference? But he said, I'll tell you. And this is how personal God is with me, for sure. And I know with anybody who gives him permission to be. But I remember hearing, that small, still voice. He goes, would you like me to tell you, or would you like peace through it all? And I chose peace, because peace would stay in either situation.
Right, right.
And that's what you just said. He asked you, how will it help you? And God is so good that way. He will only reveal to us what is going to bring healing, what is going to be good for his children. When I needed to know how to heal the affair, he knew exactly what to tell me. He knew exactly what to show me. And that's what healed. Everything else didn't matter. Some of the things I thought were important really didn't matter. It was what God knew I had to heal.
So
that made the difference.
When you were, okay, so when these things had happened, the abuse and all that stuff, and you and Ron are really getting to know each other while you're married, that wasn't enough time to really get to know each other, the engagement time. So did you talk about those things with him, saying that, look, there are some things in my life that and then when you start having the kids, like, these are the reasons why. Did you discuss those things with him?
No, didn't even know. I operated with the guard and with the autopilot. I yelled.
He would ever question
yell like that.
Would he ever question you, like, why? I think it's fun when the kids all.
Yes, all the time. And, like things like, this is one thing I've got to share. And I just thought of it, because you don't know where you're operating from if it happened in childhood. When I was a child, I already told you, I was very rejected by my mom, but there was one thing that my mom approved, and that was how smart I was at school. I was a great student. So in the 3rd grade, there was a math competition, and I made my mom help me with that. That was one thing. She would spend time with me doing homework. So I made her study that math. I was going to get the prize. I was going to get the ribbon. I was going to get the certificate. I was going to get it all, right? And I did. And I ran home with my certificate. I got 99 out of 100, top of the class. Nobody even came close. Like second runner up and third runner up wasn't even close to that. I was ecstatic. I knew she was going to be over the top. Ran home, showed it to her, and she looked at it. And then I handed her my test. And when she looked at the certificate, there was a big smile of acceptance. I nearly thought I was going to get a hug. Didn't quite get it. And then she looked down at the test and saw that red X, the one wrong.
No.
And she looked at that. I'm in grade 3. And she says, how could you have got that wrong?
Oh.
I know. See her reaction? That's the reaction I get from everyone. Now, I didn't remember that story until I was doing my storyboard at Dr. Phil. Now, everything made sense. When my husband would say, is anything ever good enough for you? Well, if 99 out of 100 doesn't cut it, why would when my kids, I would tell them to clean their room, and my husband would hear me yelling at them, sometimes mad, sometimes not. And I'd say, that's not how you make your bed. But mommy, I did my best. I'd look at them like, who said I was looking for your best? That was the parent I was. So you see how you can connect the dots. Once we saw 99 out of 100, he suddenly had such compassion for that little girl with the same reaction you just had. But I didn't know that prior to marriage. I didn't know that. And that's not what you do in premarital counseling. They should.
Exactly.
They should. But I mean, I get a lot of engaged couples that come through now that churches send to our program for that very reason. I didn't know that I was operating from 99 out of 100 is not good enough.
Right, right.
So I'm not looking for your best. I'm looking for the best. And I set the bar. And 99 out of 100 is not the bar. 100 is the bar. Right?
My mom would be happy if I got one right.
No, not quite my world. But, my kids, though, not the youngest one, but even with her, I see it. Like, it's so important for them to be so academically. And I thought, but I've healed from that. But there's still spillover. I still am so proud of them when they do something that's, even with my grandkids, I notice it. My grandchild comes, he gets me to study his spelling with him, and then he comes and he's got 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, and I'm like all over it. I'm going, is that wrong? But I want to be proud of him. It's just,
of course,
that balance. I still have to really watch myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those triggers. So those are the kind of things that I think, when an affair happens, because of God, I was able to go back and not feel condemnation from that. See, the thing about discovering those things in your past, it's not so that you feel shamed or condemnation. It's also not an excuse for who you've become. And I want to make this maybe as a real statement. Don't use your past as an excuse for who you've become, but your past offers you an explanation.
Yes.
That 99 out of 100 explained everything to Ron and I. Now we could heal and change. But without that reveal of that on my storyboard, we could have never figured out what that was about me. And why would I change or heal something that I don't even know is wrong?
Yeah.
I was like, you're way too easy on the kids.
Yeah.
And he was trying to compensate for how hard I was, not realizing it, right? Again, how we grew up.
I know, it's like we got to pass tests and get, to get a license to do everything else, but parenting, anybody can do it. And,
exactly.
And, it's just so sad.
And even marriage, you decide to get married or move in together or have a relationship. And like you said, I hadn't even healed from the loss. So I go in with this magnificent loss and huge. And then my fear because of the vow is that, what if he dies? Well, okay.
Did you often
dies?
That
I was very protective.
Did you often feel
Sorry?
like, what if Ron died? Did that try to come back?
All the time. If he just got sick a little bit, I would like, are you dying? the first time after about 10 years of marriage, she ended up in the hospital with really bad stomach pain. And I fell apart. I couldn't even go back to the hospital. My sister had to come over, take the kids because the kids were little. And she goes, "You're a mess." I said, "He's going to die. He's going to die." You know, so there was a reason for that vow. I mean, it was there was good reason for it, you know.
Well, guess what? I made a vow that I have to end the show. So we are actually, see how fast these shows go? It's crazy.
Yes, it is.
But I want people to be able to go and get your book. It's called How God Used the Other Woman. The next episode, we are going to get to the actual affair, but I had to do all this backstory because it was really important that leads up to this. And then also the name of your ministry is Relationship Lifeline.
Yes.
Okay.
And they can find it on the web. Yeah.
Okay. So they can go on Amazon and get How God Used the Other Woman. And then your ministry is called Relationship Lifeline.
Lifeline.org.
Okay, great. All right, go there, people. You know, it's like Butch and I teach on Wednesday nights about marriage, but we just know our marriage. I don't know about other marriages. So it's really important that whether you've just got married, you've been married for 20, 30, 40 years, you don't have to just, well, we've been married so many years, like, you know, who cares anymore? No. Your marriage needs to be refreshed. Your marriage needs to be exuberated, needs to be, you know, just, I don't know, just
needs to be fun. It should be fun.
Yes, it needs to be fun. And listen, Butch and I talk about this all the time because we work together, we live together, of course, we do everything together. We have to work to make sure that we keep it at a fun level because it can become very mundane after a while. And so that's something that we have to keep, you know, on the burner at all times so that we don't fall into any kind of traps. So anyway, love you all. You guys go to healingjourneystoday.com, check out everything there, our newsletter. We do have oh my gosh, we've got our conference coming up in Jacksonville, Florida, October 28th and 29th. It's going to be amazing. You have to go sign up, please, only if you know you can make it. We only have about 150 chairs. It's a small venue, so we can't have you register and then not show up. Of course, I know there's anything at the last minute can happen, but if you know you can't come, please go and take your name off of the Eventbrite so that we can fill it back up with other people. But we love you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll see you next week to hear about the actual affair with Tina and Ron. So we'll see you next week on The Journey. Bye-bye.